Welcome to Mishna study Masechet Shabbat Perek Aleph Mishnah Yod. Over here, this Mishnah we're going to discuss cooking and baking close to Shabbat, and this is a very important Mishnah. It comes up a lot in Halacha, and it's important. A couple of phrases over here is important to remember. En solin basar ubasal ubetza ela kadesh yitzolu. Right, that's how Rambam's Girsa comes up in the Halacha. Ela kadesh yitzolu b'od yom. That's how a lot of times you'll see the phraseology in the Halacha. So you're not allowed to roast. You're not allowed to cook, roast meat, right? You can't put up a barbecue right before Shabbat, right? Shabbat starting at 4:30, you can't put up a barbecue at 4:29. That doesn't work, right? Or onions, you can't cook onions. Or an egg, you can't cook an egg, right? Unless there's enough time for this item to cook, right? Or roast before Shabbat rolls in, right? So this is really important. It's a halacha that we worry about, like we mentioned earlier. Even Bet Hillel would agree. Like usually, as long the action is being done. I'm not cooking on Shabbat. The action is being done on Shabbat. That should be okay. I could put up a steak right before Shabbat to let it cook on its own. The same way I could give my clothing to the laundromat before Shabbat, and set a fish trap, a fish cage down as a trap before Shabbat as well, and let it catch on its own. Why would this be any different? And the issue over here is, like we mentioned earlier, there's a gezerah. And the gezerah is shemei hateh begahalim. We worry that a person may come to stoke the coals. And because of this gezerah, that person may come to stoke the coals, Chachamim said you're not allowed to even put up food close to Shabbat and let it cook. Now, there are certain halachic parameters when it comes to this. If it's something that's ma'achal ben derosai, right? If it's already cooked enough, right? According to Rambam, it's half cooked. According to Rashi, it's a third cooked, right? And that would be okay. So if it's cooked enough, then already you're not going to stoke the coals because it's good enough already, right? Or if you're putting on it, it's totally raw, right? And there's no chance that you're going to be eating it, right? Then there's also you're allowed to go ahead and cook that, right? It's like plugging in a plapara hamin, a plapara chulun right before Shabbat, right? It could be an issue to plug it in a half hour, an hour before Shabbat. You're plugging it right before Shabbat, that could be okay. So there's different halachic parameters when it comes to this, but this is the root, the base of the halacha. This is our Mishnah. And so you can't roast basaru batzalu betzael kedesh yitzolu. Now the Mishnah continues. Now let go ahead and put bread into the oven right before sundown for the same reason. Nor can you put a cake on top of coals, right? You're not going to bake a cake. Right? Unless there's enough time for the face of it, to become brownish, right? To crust. Right? When you put the bread in the oven, so if I build a picture over here, when you have the bread in the oven, they would take the bread and they would stick it. They would stick it inside the oven. They'd stick it on the walls, right? So now when you stick it up on the wall itself, right? Chamim say, right? Tanakama says that the panea, right, the face that's the face of the bread that's facing the fire when it's stuck on the wall, it needs to brown, and that's enough. Once it does that, that's considered okay. Rabbi Eliezer comes and says, okay, doesn't have to have the face of the bread that's facing the fire. It's enough for the side that's touching the oven, right? That's stuck to the oven, right? This would crust much faster, right? Think about it like a brick oven pizza. When the bottom will crust much faster than the top, right? The one that's being stuck to the wall itself. Right? This is how Rambam explains the Mishnah, that Rabbi Eliezer is actually as good as Rabbi Azar. Rabbi Azar is more mekel, right? That's how Rambam understands it. By the way, Rashi is different. Rashi actually understands that Rabbi Azar is more mahmir, which is interesting because he understands which one will crust first. According to Rashi, he seems to think that the side facing the fire will crust first, and he thinks that Rambam is more makil. It's interesting. Rambam does not say that, and it seems like most of the Rishonim agree with Rambam and the actual practicality of it, of how it actually works. The Chaz not like Rabbi Azar. And as we mentioned, when we said that the food needs to be cooked, right? We mentioned it needs to be cooked enough in order to be eaten, right? The first half of the Mishnah, when you're cooking the meat, when you're roasting the meat, it needs enough to be eaten. As we mentioned, that would be the laws of Ma'achal ben Derosai.